The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Admit it. No matter how much you've been enjoying the Jayden Daniels show so far, there's a part of you that says, when are they going to pull the rug out? Yeah, admit it. And you would be justified in feeling that way. We saw this movie 12 years ago with RG3, and the rug got pulled out. But the movie's a lot different now, and you're going to hear from Dan Quinn on that coming up shortly. Also, Chris Long, who does a podcast, won a couple of Super Bowls with the Eagles and the Patriots, son of Howie Long. He says, I'm not pumping my brakes on this. This is the real thing. It is the absolute real thing. So believe, and believe in the Commanders, who are the highest scoring offense in the NFL after 5 weeks. They're averaging 31 points a game. Baltimore is number 2 at 29.4. And what do you know? They're going to hook up in Baltimore this weekend with the Ravens favored by 6.5. It is a stunning start. And if we didn't have all this history, I think we'd be more all in, wouldn't we? Wouldn't we at this point? But I think there's a part of us having the post-Dan Snyder stress syndrome that we're not totally believing. We're not totally buying in, although it has been awfully fun to watch. And this is going to be a real test. You know, Baltimore's defense hasn't been that good either. I mean, it's not like they're blowing people out every week. They're having close games as they did last week against Cincinnati, and if it's not a bad snap on a 59-yard field goal attempt, which in today's day and age is easily makeable, then the Ravens probably lose at Cincinnati. But just as Lamar Jackson had fumbled the snap on a shotgun setting up that field goal attempt for Cincinnati, Baltimore was able to come back and win that game. And, you know, it's a totally different look at 3-2 rather than 2-3. It's amazing how the outlook is. And at 1-4, you know, there's only 2 teams in the league that are undefeated. That's the Kansas City Chiefs at 5-0 and the Minnesota Vikings with, Sam Darnold on his third team. I don't know if they're for real either. So, you know, when you get into the conversation of best teams in football, and some of the power rankings have the Commanders as high as 5. I think ESPN this week has them at number 7. Yeah, I mean, it's belief time. And certainly I didn't feel like this was going to happen this quickly. Right? When Snyder sold the team to the Harris Group, it was too late to make changes last year. They stuck with Ron Rivera, who knew he was a lame duck. They won 4 games, and you figure this year, okay, win 6 or 7 and find out if you got a real quarterback in Jayden Daniels and, you know, see what goes on from there. Well, you know, this might be the kind of year. I'm not saying it's a Super Bowl team, and once you get into the playoffs, it's a different animal, but right now, through 5 games, this team is very much tracking towards the playoffs. And if there's no real regression or no falling off a cliff, which I don't think is going to happen with Jayden Daniels, we're going to have ourselves a season here, right? Meantime, Kansas City Chiefs. They won last night. Not overly impressive, though Patrick Mahomes did throw for 331 yards. They beat the Saints 26-13. I think the Saints were kind of a fraud. They fattened up early on Carolina, the worst team in the league, and then they go and they face the Cowboys, and they roll up a lot of points against Dallas. But I think we saw the real Saints last night as they managed only 13 points. And, you know, Kansas City is the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. They're not winning in blowouts, but they're winning, and they're 5-0. And there's a lot to be said for 5-0, even if it doesn't look all that impressive. And it's a team that has had historically great offense and players that are going to the Hall of Fame like Patrick Mahomes. But they're relying right now on their defense, and so far so good. Again, 5-0, as Troy Aikman and Joe Buck discussed it last night with Scott Van Pelt.
Yeah, I mean, they're 5-0, and they, you know, we talked about it when we sat down on Monday Night Countdown. They have a head coach that is very creative and has the ability to cover for what they don't have. They've done an amazing job of not only creating through the draft and developing here, but bringing guys back that have been here before that seem to fit right back in like they never left. So they're thin on the outside. There's no denying that, but they still have creative ways to get the ball down the field. They showed it tonight, and like Patrick just said, their defense deserves credit for being, I think, really, really good and coordinated by a guy who's done a heck of a job his whole career.
That's a perfect segue, Troy. I feel like I so often ask you questions about the quarterback, but as a guy that played that position and go up against defense and all the schemes that Steve Spagnuolo is trying to deploy, where's Jones? They move him around a lot. Just how difficult are the questions that Chiefs defense asks of the opposition that they face?
Well, Joe talked a little bit about it earlier in the game that, Steve Spagnuolo kind of got his break under Jim Johnson, who was a defensive coordinator for a long time under Andy Reid there in Philadelphia, and a lot of similar things. And as someone who played against Jim Johnson and those styles of defenses, they come after you. And so as a quarterback, the looks aren't always the same, and they're not the same each week. So you don't know when they're coming and you don't know what they're going to be. And he mixes them up really well. And that's why at the end of that game, when the game's on the line, he usually has something that he's going to do that you're not quite ready for. You know you're going to get something, but you're not sure exactly what it is. And I think he utilizes his personnel really well. He's got some good players. You talk about Chris Jones, who's just a disruptive force. But he had the Saints on their heels the entire game, and they really just didn't get anything going. They had under 200 yards of offense until Haener came in at quarterback to replace Derek Carr. So just an outstanding, really, team win offensively, what they were able to do without some key players. But Steve Spagnuolo was every bit Andy Reid's equal tonight in this game.
Yeah, and, when you look at Spagnuolo as a defensive coordinator, maybe the offensive equivalent is Kliff Kingsbury. Both of them have failed as head coaches, but they obviously both know what they're doing. Kingsbury in developing this rookie quarterback. He coached Patrick Mahomes in college, and he has that touch. And maybe it's just, it's one of those things, not exactly the Peter principle where you rise to your level of incompetence, but they may be just so good at what they do on either side of the ball that you got to celebrate them more for that. I always felt that Richie Pettibone should have gotten consideration for the Hall of Fame, even though in his 1 year as a head coach, it was a disaster. They finished 4-12. He was fired and never coached again. But what he did in all those years under Joe Gibbs as the defensive coordinator, where Gibbs said, hey, Richie, that's your side of the ball. I'm going to work with the offense. We'll make decisions on things that we do in certain situations, but I'm leaving that up to you. And it worked great. And it seems to be the same way in Kansas City. Remember Spagnuolo in the days of just bumbling and stumbling under Dan Snyder and his boy Vinny Serrato. After Joe Gibbs retired for the second time after the playoff loss in Seattle at the end of the 2007 season, and Dan Snyder was caught off guard by that. I guess he thought that Gibbs was going to stay forever, and business was good when Gibbs was here. They were selling out the stadium. They had 2 bad years, but they made the playoffs 2 years, and that's the most success that any coach ever had in the Dan Snyder era. But he left. His grandson was ill, and he was 67 years old, and probably time to move on. And they waited until the Giants had finished up the Super Bowl. Spagnuolo was the defensive coordinator on that team, which beat the undefeated Patriots in that Super Bowl. He obviously did a great job in containing Tom Brady, and they won a close game, thanks in large part to Spagnuolo. So Snyder and Vinny wait till that's over. It's, now the later part of February. Everybody else is hired. You're getting ready for things like the combine and the draft and things like that. So they're behind the 8 ball. They wait and they wait and they wait. They bring Spagnuolo in. They make him stay at Snyder's house for a night. And he and Vinny go through the Notre Dame book on how to hire a coach. And Spagnuolo goes, this thing is an S show. Turns him down, goes back to the Giants. Now, eventually, he wound up with the Rams, and I think he also coached in Detroit as a head coach. Didn't work out. But as a defensive coordinator, what you're hearing there from Troy Aikman and Joe Buck is, yeah, he's every bit what Andy Reid is on offense for the Chiefs, and the only difference really is the title there. And right now, this Kansas City Chiefs team is being carried by its defense. Things may change over the course of the season, But, they got Travis Kelce on track last night. As a matter of fact, this was kind of an embarrassing moment on the telecast. Travis made a big play, and Aikman says, as they pan to the booth, and there's Taylor Swift. She missed a game, and everybody, they've broken up. No, they haven't broken up. They're still a couple. But they pan to the booth, and Aikman says, the missus likes it. And Buck says, they're not married. And Aikman says, oh, I know, and I'm sure I'm in trouble for saying that. I mean, I think it's kind of like locker room talk, jock talk. When hey, how's the missus? Meaning the girlfriend, or does he know something? Does he know that maybe they're secretly married? Who knows? But Kelce's off the schneid. He had 8 catches for 67 yards in last night's game, but that was kind of a oops moment for Troy Aikman. Meantime, here in town, Dan Quinn holding his usual Monday news conference, and right at the end of it, he was asked an interesting question, which I think has crossed the minds of all of us, and that is, hey, this is great, 4-1, leading the league in points scored. Jayden Daniels having an historically great rookie year. It's also wine and rosy for an organization that's been a complete train wreck for almost a quarter of a century. What about the fans? And this was, I guess, a message. What do you say to the fans who are waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under them?
I don't think of it in that way at all. And I didn't feel that or sense that in the game at all about the energy that they brought. Like I said, we were absolutely dripping in it because of what they brought. So I just want them to know every time we go, they're going to see a team that's absolutely bringing it and tough and physical. So that's, last game, a month from now, 10 years from now. That's just how we're going to get down, and knowing that they're creating an environment that's going to make it really challenging for other teams to go because of the players on the field and the fans in the environment. If you put both of those two things together, that's a legitimate home field advantage. So that's why I thought it was so important to recognize it, because part of the reason the team played really well on third down, man, it was loud. And it was hard. They had to make checks at the line of scrimmage and go through things. And it's as fun as you can imagine being down on the field when it's absolutely ripping like that. So for those who are thinking the other way, I'd say it's 2024. And so just let's let it ride with these guys and have a blast and be as loud as you can.
Now, Cleveland 1 for 13 on third downs. That probably was more Cleveland than Crowd, but that's right out of the Gibbs playbook. Yep, we need all our fans. Hey, we need our fans out there cheering for us. And I think Quinn has an understanding of what this place was like the last few years. He was the defensive coordinator in Dallas when he came in the last 2 years, and the crowd was probably about 75% Dallas. They play late in the year now. We'll see. We'll see where both teams are. I mean, it could be for playoff positioning, or one team makes the playoffs. Who knows? But this shift to a home field advantage. Now, it's Cleveland. It's not necessarily like we may see with Pittsburgh in a few weeks, or certainly when Philadelphia comes in, but it's a home field advantage now, which has been unbelievably hard to find for the last maybe 10, 12 years, because the team was so bad. The place was half empty some of the time, and those who were there were rooting for the other team. And now it's a full house, not quite full. They had 59,000. I think that the attendance, the capacity is up to about 63. But it's a different feel than we've had in a long time. And what he's saying is, of course we have a home field advantage. We got great fans. And look at how the fans are helping us. It caused Cleveland to have problems on third downs. Yes, get in. And he says at the end, hey, it's 2024. Get on board. Ride the train. And keep winning, that'll help. If they go through some real tough times and lose some games, we'll see how that drops it off. But I think right now people are lining up to get tickets to games. It's a whole new feeling, and each week it ramps up, and it ramps up after they beat Cleveland. Let's see what happens. If they go to Baltimore and win, it's a home game against Carolina. Nobody's coming up from Carolina to support that team. So if it's a full house against Carolina, watch out. And then you're going to have an incredibly hyped game the week after that as you've got Caleb Williams and the Bears coming in, 1 versus 2. And while Caleb Williams got off to a slower start than Jayden Daniels, he actually had better numbers than him this past week, and he's coming as well. So it looks like both of them are on track to be excellent quarterbacks in their careers. One last thing on this, and it's the Jayden Daniels story. Chris Long does a podcast, played for the Eagles, won a Super Bowl there, played for the Patriots, won a Super Bowl, son of Howie Long. He's been touting what he's seen so far from Jayden Daniels, and after watching Sunday's game, said this:
I will not pump the brakes on Jayden Daniels. A lot of you have, over the course of the last month, said to me, like, you're doing the thing. You're out over your skis on this kid. You're like, I jump out of the gym for too many players. I don't. This guy is special. If he doesn't pan out, if he doesn't become one of the better quarterbacks in the league, like I'm talking about a top 5 to 10 quarterback for the next decade, then they need to study this period. I mean, he did some incredible things. You said today, I know it's the Cleveland Browns, but it's not who you beat, it's how you beat them. And it's not, who you're throwing against, it's the throws you're making. And today it was like, these are some good cover guys, and you're going to see man coverage. And this dude is poised. I mean, he made one play at the goal line that, you're like, okay, he's a rookie. I forgot about that. But other than that, I will not pump the brakes on this kid. You pump the brakes. You pump the brakes. You need to get me one of those 18-wheeler pull-off ramps with the sandbags, because I'm not hitting the brakes, dude. This kid is the future.
Top 5 quarterback next 10 years. Manna from heaven, right? We'll see. But there's no indication that he's wrong. And, why pump the brakes when this is actually possible in the NFL? We've seen other organizations do it. Now, would this have happened 3 years ago if Dan Snyder owned the team? Who knows? But they put a structure in place where this can happen. You've got a real general manager now who turned over half the roster. The offensive line, which was really a question mark going into the season, has been outstanding. And you got the quarterback whisperer in Kliff Kingsbury. So everything is lining up for this to work out. You look at quarterbacks in other situations, and many of them wind up busts because the organization was so bad. So while this is an individual success with Jayden Daniels, you could also look at it as an organizational success. And been a long time coming, hadn't it? Coming up, Dan Quinn on the continuing development of Jayden Daniels. That's a weekly question, so we get a weekly update on that. And also, Tony teases the bandwagon. What? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Oh, do you remember the bandwagon? Well, you probably have to be in at least your 40s, probably your 50s to remember that, because that goes back to the 1991 season when Tony Kornheiser was a columnist with the Washington Post. He had not yet joined ESPN other than to be on the Sports Reporter show, which was a Sunday morning show, and he was primarily a writer. And he got the idea because the team came out of the gate in an unbelievable way. I mean, that team won its opening game 45-0. And so people were looking at it like, what do you think here? And they've been good, too, because they'd already won a couple of Super Bowls in previous years. And so he did a weekly column, Tuesday column, making fun of how good they were. And he got nicknames for various people. He called Joe Gibbs Coach Joe, and talked about Phil Simms as the blonde hoser, and it just really worked. It was all about the fun and games, and the idea was they were riding the bandwagon all the way to the Super Bowl. And when they made it to the Super Bowl, he and several others, including Jeannie McManus, who was his editor at the Post and was a regular on his radio show for a long time, they all went in an RV. Tony hates to fly, and they took an RV to Minneapolis for the Super Bowl, where they blew out the Buffalo Bills and completed one of the great seasons in NFL history, and arguably the greatest season that this team has ever had. And sadly, it was kind of the end because the next year they made the playoffs. Joe Gibbs retired after that season for the first time, and things quickly went downhill. They made the playoffs one time with Norv Turner as the coach, but during the Dan Snyder era, it was mostly misery, except for Joe Gibbs coming back, and that was greeted with great euphoria, but Joe Gibbs 2 never matched Joe Gibbs 1. But now you got this great hope here. So I want you to listen to this. This is from PTI yesterday. It's a national show, so it's not, they're not talking necessarily all Commanders, though they have done segments on just the Commanders. They were talking about the 3 rookie quarterbacks who are playing right now and coming around. Jayden Daniels, one of them, Caleb Williams in Chicago, the other, and Bo Nix in Denver. All of them acquitting themselves very well, particularly this last Sunday. And so yesterday, this was Tony and Mike with the assessment of the 3, and listen carefully to what Tony says at the end.
Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Bo Nix all won yesterday. Which rookie stood out most to you?
Well, I watch my rookie, Caleb Williams, more closely. I watch every snap he takes. And then I watch Jayden Daniels like 3/4 of the snaps. He just looks masterful. Look, Caleb Williams, and I started telling you this in week 2, he just looks better and better and better and better. Whenever I'm asking about the Bears, what do you think? What's your prognosis? Get better. Every week, get better. Caleb Williams is doing that. The line is getting a little better. He's getting a lot better. Play calling, it's all working better. But Jayden Daniels, Tony, he's masterful. And they play each other October 26th or something like that here in Washington, a homecoming for Caleb Williams, who's from Washington, D.C. Wow on that game. But Jayden Daniels, I love Caleb, but Jayden Daniels got to be the answer.
Let me ask you a question about Caleb Williams. What high school did he go to? You're familiar
that would
with
be Gonzaga High School. Thank you very much.
So, excuse me, Caleb Williams had a better day than Jayden Daniels. Bo Nix had a better day than Jayden Daniels. He threw for 2 scores. He ran for 1, and at one point led the Broncos to 32 or 34 straight points. But if you're watching the Washington football team, it's an entirely different circumstance. In their last 3 games, 38, 42, and 34. And kids, that's Jayden Daniels. That's where that's coming from. They are 4-1. They haven't been 4-1 since 2008. They haven't had a winning record since 2016, and they haven't had a quarterback like Jayden Daniels in this century at this point. I don't want to get carried away because they play Baltimore next. Baltimore's a very good team. But if they beat Baltimore, there's a certain RV up on a lift in a garage somewhere.
Are you promising?
And maybe.
Are you hinting?
And maybe.
By the way, Washington, highest scoring team in the league right now, Tone. Highest scoring team. And it's him.
That is the
deep
combination
ball he throws is unreal.
It's Jayden Daniels and Kliff Kingsbury. That's the combination.
Yeah, this teasing of the bandwagon, it actually happened some years after the bandwagon year when he was still writing. And then I used to do a weekly segment with him for the pregame show. And when things would get good, I said, come on. And you bring it up. Nope, not yet. If they beat. And I remember this, too. The 1997 season, which was, 96, which was only, 5 years later, they had Gus Frerotte as the quarterback, okay, but Norv Turner was the coach. And Norv Turner had been the offensive coordinator on 2 Super Bowl teams in Dallas. He came here like, okay, he was the young, hot guy at the time. And people who worked in Dallas said there was no assistant who was more respected on Jimmy Johnson's staff than Norv Turner. And Troy Aikman credits his career to Norv. So there was a feeling like, maybe he's arrived as a coach. Maybe somehow Gus Frerotte can be spun into gold. Now, Tom Brady hadn't happened yet. Tom Brady, I guess, was buried on the depth chart at Michigan at the time. But, you start to think, maybe. So the teasing of the bandwagon, we're going back now over 25 years, but all these years later, he's teasing bringing it back. Now, I don't know where the forum would be to do that other than his podcast/radio show, which you hear here every day now I guess it's 3 days a week, at 2 o'clock on ESPN 630. Maybe you'll hear it there. But, I mean, God, it's been such a long time. It's been 2 names ago and 3 decades ago since we've been talking about teasing the bandwagon, and maybe we're back. Meantime, Dan Quinn has a weekly update now. This is going to go on throughout the season. The progression of Jayden Daniels, and after 5, this is where he is on his rookie quarterback, talking yesterday.
This guy is growing, in every game. And just a month ago, we were talking about remaining a passer and having the ability to throw the ball down the field. And you saw that play to Terry. I think those are examples of the growth. And that's what's been so exciting for me and the other guys to watch, is to see this growth happen, right in front of our eyes, because he is always so prepared, the hardworking. You've seen us talk about that. But there were some times yesterday on some 3rd and 4th downs where even when they had the right blitz dialed up, he was able to get out on the perimeter and use his legs. So I thought it was a very clear demonstration of, I still will use my legs to gain first downs, but I'll also remain a passer to throw the ball down the field. And so there was as much done yesterday outside the pocket that there was inside the pocket. And sometimes where it doesn't quite start like you want, there's growth in that too. And to say, hey, this is some things I wanted to do better, and go for it. And I know that he will.
Yeah, that's what really makes him so dangerous, and why teams are hesitant to blitz him. Because if he gets out of the blitz and outside the pocket, he can make plays like he did to McLaurin, that 67-yard pass, which was a thing of beauty. And as the weeks go on, you do see it. He gets better, and he gets better, and he gets better. And now they're going to Baltimore. It's still a 1 o'clock game. They didn't even shift it to 4 for CBS. I guess they were unable to do that. But they're sending the number 1 team. Jim Nantz is going to be doing it with Tony Romo. They're going to be there in Baltimore on Sunday. NBC tried to get it. They wanted to put it as a night game, and CBS blocked it. They said, no, we want this because you're seeing the present and the future colliding here. And Adam Schefter said a week or 2 ago, maybe it's only a week ago, but he said the people that he's talking to around the league, they're telling him Jayden Daniels is Lamar Jackson 2.0. He is the new Lamar, does a lot of the same things, some of them maybe even better, because Lamar's issue in the playoffs has been he has not been as effective as a passer. Once you get there, they've shut down the run, which he does extremely well. Now, last week he was more of a passer against Cincinnati, though they've got, with King Henry, they've got a weapon there that could put the game on ice as he did last week. But still, he was more of a passer in that game. So you got the two of them going head to head. Everybody's looking for comparison, and Dan Quinn is not offering them.
I think everybody knows, how exceptional and remarkable Lamar is. And so I get why people would say that. Here's somebody who's got athletic ability and can absolutely rip it as well. But I've always wanted Jayden to be the best version of him, and absolutely go for it in that way. They'll feature different ways in the offense than we do. But, as far as like comparison, I didn't allow myself to kind of go down all that road. I just really wanted to kind of stay in all the things that he could do and how we would feature him in our offense with our guys.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be no point in him making that comparison. So you understand that, why he would say something like that. But when you watch him play, there are some similarities. And, you look at Lamar, and he looks thicker. He's maybe an inch or two shorter. But he said he's got his weight down where he's maybe even below Jayden Daniels. Daniels weighed in at the combine at 210. I don't know what he weighs now. Maybe he gets a little worn down through the course of the season, maybe loses some weight. But Lamar made an effort to get his weight down. He's played as high as 230, I believe. And he said, I think 205 at this point. So he actually weighs less, and we think of Jayden as thinner. Also, just watching the last few games, you're seeing him protect himself better. First, he had the head-first slide, remember, in Tampa in week 1. Then, as the weeks went on, he had a couple of baseball slides. He didn't have to do any of that this past week. He was running out of bounds, and that's the smart thing to do. Live for another day. Don't try and get a few extra yards and take a hit. Just run out of bounds, and he's been very effective in doing that. One other thing from Quinn yesterday, And this is I found this interesting. I've been watching the games, and not just their games, but games around the league. We saw in the Giant game, kicker goes down on a kickoff. It changes the whole trajectory of the game. Perhaps if the Giants had a kicker, they would have won that game. And a couple other games I've been watching where kickers have gotten hurt on kickoffs. After the preseason, where they were experimenting with the new rule, the way the new kickoff is, I heard a conversation with Bill Belichick, I guess it was on McAfee's show, where he said, it doesn't make sense to kick off because you're better off just taking it at the 30-yard line. We've seen enough in the preseason where it doesn't benefit you. Well, the Commanders have been kicking off, and they're scoring a lot of points. They're leading the league in points at 31, so there's a lot of kickoffs. And they're kicking off. They're not having kickoff out of the end zone where they take it on the 30. And even though in some cases they get it past the 30, like Arizona on their opening drive, they got it out to the 40 and then fumbled up to the 45. So instead of starting on the 30 on their opening drive, they were at the 45, which I think made a big difference. They had a short field, and they went right down and scored a touchdown, and that's been happening. They've, early strikes against Washington, but they come right back for them. But Quinn talking about the strategy behind kicking off. There's two bad things that can happen. One, the kickoff can be returned deep or even for a touchdown, and two, your kicker can get hurt on the play. But he continues to kick off, and he explained yesterday why.
I love the energy, Dave, that the cover units bring, specifically the kickoff coverage. And I know sometimes it may get out to the 28 and 29, and on a stat sheet it may look like, well, it's just 1 yard difference. When you see the defense take the field after a big hit and the energy that gets created from that, there is more to it than shows up on the stat sheet. And Bloor's right in the middle of those. And it also gives you some chances to knock the ball out. And we did that at Arizona. We didn't get it, but I do like their energy and their effort and toughness, and they do help set a tone for who we want to be.
That's Stan Quinn. Sorry for the delay, but I just saw this on Twitter. That's Quinn on the kickoffs and why they do it. And I guess, that does make some sense in that it fires everybody up. But how about this? Adam Schefter reporting the Jets have fired Robert Saleh. Wow. Aaron Rodgers runs that team. There was that thing last week where Saleh was talking about the cadence that Rodgers has as he tries to draw the other team off sides, but they had a lot of false starts, and that was a problem. And Rodgers denied that there was an issue between the two of them. Then they go to London, and Rodgers did not play well at all against Minnesota. They're now 2-3 on the season, and, they're on the brink right now. Wow. Robert Saleh fired as head coach of the Jets. This just breaking from Adam Schefter. And, man, I mean, this is one of those deals, and this is going to be a great segue as we're going to talk about the Deshaun Watson deal and why, as we all know, it is the worst contract in NFL history, but just how bad it is. It could turn out that the Aaron Rodgers trade for the Jets is going to be one of the worst in the history of the NFL. They got him as the missing piece for a team that had a good defense, and they thought they could win a Super Bowl last year. They didn't have a good backup quarterback behind him. He had remained relatively healthy throughout his career, but, late 30s, and he lasts 4 plays last season. And with Zach Wilson, they basically flushed the season. So it was all, okay, mulligan, let's start again. Rodgers is back, and Rodgers is going to lead this team deep and maybe even win a Super Bowl. And now they're 2-3, and I guess it was New York ain't big enough for the two of them. So Robert Saleh, according to Adam Schefter, has been fired as coach of the Jets. Wow. Wowza. Now, this is early in the season. It's too late to bring anybody in except for Bill Belichick. And the speculation, I'm sure, is going to start right away. He is actually, I guess, was Woody Johnson the owner of the team? I don't even know. It was so long ago. But it was remember, 2000, Bill Parcells in the succession plan retired as coach of the Jets, his trusted defensive coordinator who helped him win 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. And now they're reunited with the Jets, and he turns it over to Belichick, and Belichick is on the job for 1 day, and he writes on a napkin, "I resign as HC of the NYJ," and he winds up with the New England Patriots, and the rest is history. It's got to be a name that's going to be thrown around. I mean, is it too late for him to come in now? I don't know. Not with a veteran quarterback. I don't think so. And he would want a veteran quarterback because he floundered without Tom Brady. So let the speculation begin. I'm sure this is going to come up. I don't know if it's going to happen, but Belichick's name has got to be in the mix for the Jets with Robert Saleh fired. Wow, what a bombshell. That's huge. I'll try and follow Twitter as we move along, but I did want to talk about the Deshaun Watson deal. And yesterday, Louis Riddick, who has worked in the front office of the then Redskins, now the Commanders, now with ESPN, he talked to Dan Patrick yesterday about just how bad that deal is, and we'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram's coming up at 11. He probably will have more to say about this. Tony off today, but Mike Callow has his show in the afternoon, and this is going to be the buzz of sports throughout today and days forward. Just breaking within the last few minutes, the Jets have fired Robert Saleh after a 2-3 start, and they have named defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, Ulbritch, as interim head coach. So the defensive coordinator is becoming the interim head coach, which means that the offense is essentially coached by Aaron Rodgers. What a freaking disaster this is. Oh, my God. I mean, this was supposedly the last piece. Aaron Rodgers, great defense. Rodgers coming in, and, what you heard, both sides playing down, that they're butting heads. Well, obviously they were butting heads. I mean, this is a move that you don't want to make at 2-3. You're still in the ball game at that point. You still can make the playoffs, but if there is real friction between the head coach and the player who clearly now runs the organization, I mean, it's the hierarchy is Woody Johnson, owner, Aaron Rodgers, number 2 in command. I mean, that's clearly what's going on here. The Bill Belichick speculation has started. Could Belichick come in this year? I think that they would put out an all-out blitz to do this, because if you're going to win with Aaron Rodgers, it's got to happen like this year or next year. The guy's 40 years old. How many more years are you going to get out of him? You had a mulligan year last year because he tore his Achilles on the 4th play of the season. But, man, this is absolutely stunning. Maybe not New York. Maybe people have seen this coming. I don't know. I'm not there. But they didn't look good at all playing in London. And Rodgers threw interceptions. He looked slow. And maybe he's done. Maybe he's washed. This could be among the most disastrous moves. I mean, the Jets have made a bunch of them, but it's just I don't want to say funny, because I know what it feels like to be a fan of a team that has unbelievable dysfunction and has had quarterback dysfunction over the years, most notably Robert Griffin III and drafting Dwayne Haskins at 15 and all the things that they went through. But my God, what a mess. And we just saw another mess in Cleveland where Deshaun Watson doesn't look like he can. Not only does he not look like he can play, he doesn't want to play. He looks disinterested out there. Looked absolutely terrible. And so now it's damage assessment time. The car is wrecked. We got to find out if it's totaled. And we got the Browns saying no quarterback change going on here. We're sticking with them. But here's the deal. In 2022, Cleveland traded first-round picks in 2022, 2023, and 2024, 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson, along with a third-rounder in 2023 and fourth-round picks in 2022 and 2024. So 3 first-round picks in exchange for Deshaun Watson, and they signed him And the only reason he waived his no trade clause contract in Houston was that he could get a guaranteed deal from Cleveland. Signed a 5-year, fully guaranteed $230 million contract, largest contract and most guaranteed money ever given out. During his first year with the team in 2022, and remember, of that money, of the $230 million, only $1 million went to that first year in 2022 because they knew he was going to be suspended, and he was for 11 games, but it didn't cost him that much money because he was only making $1 million a year. This goes from the sexual harassment allegations at the time he was with the Texans. He settled most of those suits, but the league looked into it and said, no, that's conduct detrimental, and we're going to suspend you for 11 games. Came back that year, wasn't good, finished with a 79.1 passer rating, 58.2 completion percentage in 6 starts, not good. Last year, suffered a shoulder injury that ended his season after Week 11. Joe Flacco comes off his couch, leads them to the playoffs, and the reason they didn't bring Flacco back was because they didn't want to have a quarterback controversy if Watson struggled, as he has. Now, he did get off to a good start last year, 5-1, but the defense was very good. The Browns are now 1-4. Watson, as we saw Sunday, is terrible, 74.8 passer rating. And here's the worst part about it. Next year, he has a base salary of $46 million, a cap charge of $72.9 million, and a dead cap hit of $172.2 million. That's if they cut him loose. In the final year of the deal in 2026, so they're on the hook for him for 2 more years, his base salary and cap charge are the same as in 2025, which is a dead cap charge of $99.8 million. You can't get rid of him. He's there. You're stuck with him. It is an absolute disaster. How big of a disaster? I think we're all in agreement it's the worst contract in NFL history. You're off the hook, Albert Hainsworth. This is Louis Riddick yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show.
This is the single, and this isn't hyperbole either. This is the single worst contract and situation. Maybe I'd have to really sit here and think about it, a little bit more, but I can't think of a single worse contract situation in the history of sports. Think about that.
I mean, at least Tua plays well when he's in there. I never would have signed him to an extension, given the medical risk. But Watson just doesn't play well. It's like he's vacant when he's out there.
That's it.
He's checked out.
This is Tua. I mean, I get it. I get the risk, that they were taken down there in Miami, given his medical history. But it's everything that came with Deshaun that they knew of before they even signed him. And now on top of it, the crap play that he's putting out there right now is just like the icing on the whole crap cake. It's just awful. The whole thing is awful. And I'm telling you, it's one of those situations where you sit, and I feel so bad for Cleveland because, honestly, in my career, I mean, that's the place I identify with the most because it's where I was the longest and where really I learned football. I believe I know it right now. And to see them now, they're a very talented football team that now is becoming again one of those, one of those franchises where you just sitting there going, yeah, that's the Browns.
But are they going to be sellers?
I don't know what can you do?
Myles Garrett, would you?
You mean sellers as far as selling off some
pieces?
Of the pieces?
Yeah. I mean, nobody's going to take Deshaun.
Right. I don't think so. I don't think that's what you would want to do. I really do think you could probably, you saw what Joe Flacco did with this football team a year ago. You literally right now, I believe, to give themselves a chance to pull out of this downward spiral that they're in, need to replace one guy. You probably need to sit one guy down.
Yeah, but they chose not to bring Joe back because they didn't want a quarterback controversy.
Exactly.
And they bring in Jameis for the same amount of money that Joe is making in Indianapolis. That to me is embarrassing.
You're right. It is. What I'm saying is you don't need to be sellers. All you need to do is really move one guy out of the way. Move him over here, set him right next to Kevin Stefanski on the sideline, and you may see this whole football team turn around in terms of the way in which they play. But So that they don't need to break everything up. They just need to make one change. But to make that one change would be admitting to the most colossal mistake in the history of the NFL when it comes to contracts. And I don't know, is ownership willing to do that at this point? If they don't, then it's just going to get worse.
It is the most colossal mistake in the history of NFL contracts. That's Louis Riddick yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. We just outlined the numbers and the amount of money that they're on the hook for, guaranteed over the next 2 years. I mean, you can't cut him. He's just there as an albatross. And is Jameis Winston going to be the answer? He's going to be better, but he's proven over the years he's an interception machine. You're not going to win with him. Maybe you can do well enough just handing the ball off, just not making mistakes, and hope your defense, helps you. But, man, they're a mess at 1-4. And I don't think they're going to be able to get out of this. And ownership is probably saying to Stefanski, hey, you got to play him. Sorry, I know you don't want to, but you got to play him. Anyway, CBS Sports did a breakdown of the worst contracts in NFL history. And, of course, now they rank Deshaun Watson number 1. Albert Hainsworth, I don't think is a surprise, is number 2. This was Dan Snyder being Dan Snyder, 2009. Even though people knew he was a cancer in the locker room, they gave him a 7-year, $100 million deal. And in the first year of that deal, 2009, he had to be kicked out of practice. This is pre-Shanahan. This was Jim Zorn's last year. They kicked him out of practice. I think it was even Christmas Day. In 12 games in 2009, he had 37 tackles and 4 sacks. Then he played only 8 games in 2010. That's when, remember, he didn't pass the Mike Shanahan conditioning test on the first day of training camp, and he was taking the conditioning test because he skipped the mandatory mini camp. That was a mess. They finally got rid of him. He was traded to the Patriots in the summer of 2011, stayed there a little while, signed with Tampa, played out the 2011 season, released, didn't play again. Absolute horrible guy, terrible human being, a disgrace. There were incidents here, sexual harassment. He got into traffic things. Just an awful person and a horrible deal. Number 3, and this probably wouldn't come to mind for you, it was a long time ago, Andre Rison with the Cleveland Browns. He'd had a great career in Atlanta, was a Pro Bowler from 1990 to 1994, signed with Cleveland 1995. At the time, got a huge contract, 5 years, $17 million, highest for a wide receiver ever. He didn't play well with Cleveland. 47 catches in 1995, only 3 touchdowns, and that would be his last season there. After a November loss to the Packers, he blasted the fans for booing him throughout the game, said he was looking forward to the team's upcoming relocation to Baltimore. Frankly, I'm ready to get the hell out of here, he said at the time, because I don't deserve it, nor do the other players. We didn't make the bleeping move. For all those booers, bleep you too. I'm glad when we get to Baltimore. He didn't make it to Baltimore, was released after the season. Now, he did win a Super Bowl with Green Bay the following year, but that was a disaster for Cleveland. Number 4, Russell Wilson with the Denver Broncos. Remember, they traded to get him from Seattle, and he signed a 5-year, $245 million deal. While he was in Denver, the team went 4-11 in his 15 starts. His first year, 2022, and then last year the team was 7-8 before he was benched, so they wouldn't have to pay him extra money on an injury settlement. And now he's injured, but he's not playing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's maybe going to get his chance this year, but right now is not playing for them. Le'Veon Bell is number 5 on this list. Le'Veon Bell, remember that? He was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Free agency, signed a 4-year, $52 million deal with the Jets. It included $35 million guaranteed. His first year, he did get 1,250 yards from scrimmage, but his 4 yards per touch were the lowest of his career at that point, 3.2 yards a carry. Had a hamstring injury, came back in 2020, early in October. The things with the team blew up because he liked a post criticizing his head coach, Adam Gase. 3 days after activating him off injured reserve, the Jets released Bell, failing to make a trade. He played in 17 games for that 4-year, $52 million deal. Number 6 on the list, Nick Foles, Jacksonville Jaguars. Remember, he led the Eagles to the Super Bowl as a backup quarterback, entered free agency in 2019, signed a 4-year, $88 million deal with Jacksonville. It included $50 million guaranteed, and it had up to $102 million with incentives. Started the year as the quarterback, but got hurt. Once he came back in Week 11, he was named the starter over Gardner Minshew. Did reclaim his starting job, but not for long. Jacksonville lost 3 straight. And then the head coach Doug Marrone, named Minshew the starter going ahead. Foles was traded to the Bears for a compensatory 4th-round pick. His run with the Jaguars, 0-4 as a starter, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. All that with $50 million guaranteed. Number 7, Kenny Golladay with the New York Giants was productive with the Lions, signed a 4-year, $72 million deal in 2021. He caught just 37 of his 76 targets for 521 yards in 14 games played. And in that time, the following year, the contract caught just 6 passes in 2022, and then was released. They released him at the end of the year. So it is a $72 million deal, 53 catches for 855 yards and a touchdown. Ooh. Nnamdi Asomugha with the Philadelphia Eagles. This goes back, remember, in 2003, he came to the Raiders as a first-round pick out of Cal, was an All-Pro 4 times with the Raiders, including from 2008 to 2010. First-team All-Pro twice. Then he signed this deal with the Eagles, 5 years, $60 million. Played 2 seasons with the Eagles, was released after 2012 when they wanted to restructure his contract. Had a little run with the 49ers and then retired in 2013. Number 9, Matt Flynn. And this is an example of the limited sample size. Now, of course, Seattle didn't know what they were getting when they drafted Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. They didn't know he would be this good. But the year before, 2011, remember they drafted Wilson the same year RG3 came here, Matt Flynn had played in 1 game for Aaron Rodgers at the end of the season when Green Bay had everything locked up. Signed a 3-year, $20 million deal in 2011. Russell Wilson won the job. In all, Flynn threw 9 passes for Seattle with that contract, and after 2012, traded to the Raiders. $20 million, 9 passes. And number 10 on the list, yet another player we're familiar with, Carson Wentz. Early June of 2019, signed a long-term deal with the Eagles, 4 years, $128 million, $107 million guaranteed. And that year he actually played okay. They went and had a 9-7 record, lost in the playoffs to Seattle. And he, in that playoff game, played only 9 snaps because of injury. 2022, things then really fell apart. He was 3-8-1 as a starter through 12 games, had 15 interceptions, was benched in a Week 13 game against the Packers. Jalen Hurts took over as the starter heading into Week 14. And just 2 seasons after signing the extension, he was traded to the Colts. They got a 3rd-round pick out of that. But he played 1 year there and then got traded here. Again, I think they gave up a 3rd-round pick to do it, and we all saw the Carson Wentz show and how bad it actually was. All right, coming up, it was 51 years ago today that we had an infield fight in a playoff game in a National League Championship Series between Pete Rose's Reds and Bud Harrelson's Mets. Both sadly are gone, and so are those days of baseball. We'll look back on that 51 years ago today as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You know, not only is it refreshing not to have football dysfunction with the Washington professional football team, whatever name you want to call them, but it's also somewhat, I don't want to say schadenfreude, but whatever it is, it's like, ooh, wow. Look at that over there. And look at the Cleveland Browns and the mess they're in with Deshaun Watson, who can't play anymore, and they're on the hook for an incredible amount of money for the next 2 years, like $180 million guaranteed that there's no way they can get out of. And then we have the news breaking within the last hour that the Jets have fired Robert Saleh, and they're playing Buffalo on Sunday night. They'll be on, is it Monday night? Sunday night or Monday night? Let's see. Scheduled. They're playing them, whatever it is, this weekend, Sunday or Monday, where they can move into a first-place tie if they beat Buffalo. I mean, their 2-3 record isn't good, but neither is the division. Buffalo's lost 2 straight, and the Jets at 2-3 are tied with Miami at 2-3. And Miami doesn't have their quarterback. Tua may come back, may not come back. The Jets at least still have Aaron Rodgers, and that's probably the reason that this happens. But, man, I mean, the season is not gone yet. Maybe this is the only way they felt they could save it. Jeff Ulbrich, who is the defensive coordinator, will take over on an interim basis. The Belichick speculation has already started. We'll see where that goes. He was the head coach of the Jets for a day before he resigned on a napkin and went to the Patriots 25 years ago, almost 25. So maybe that happens. But Adam Schefter, who broke the story, as the quarterbacks who played for Robert Saleh during his time with the Jets. You ready? Zach Wilson, 33 games. Mike White, 7 games. Aaron Rodgers, 6 games. Joe Flacco, 5 games. Trevor Siemian, 3 games. Tim Boyle, 2 games. Man, what a mess. What a mess with the New York Jets. And we'll see where this goes. They can, I guess, get things right. They got a guy who's on the staff who's going to take over on an interim basis. I don't think he's ever been a head coach before. But according to Schefter, very well respected, and they will play this enormous game with the Buffalo Bills this week with turmoil, absolute turmoil in the organization. On-field turmoil, if you want to call it that. This goes back 51 years ago today, and in talking about Pete Rose last week, this was mentioned in a lot of the obits, the fight that he had on the field, and it happened this day 51 years ago, 1973, as the Big Red Machine, who had not yet quite arrived as the Big Red Machine, but were still a great team, and with a lot of Hall of Fame players like Pete Rose and Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench, the Big Three, and a lot of really good players around them, and Sparky Anderson, a Hall of Fame manager. They're playing in 73, the Mets, who were, as Yogi Berra said, the ain't over till it's over team, that they got into the and then there was only, at that time, there was only one round of playoffs. You won the division, and then you played for the right to go to the World Series. So the Reds were a great team that year. I think they won 99 games, and the Mets won 83. And it was like, what a big difference. And nobody would have expected the Mets to be there, but they did what it took to get there. And now they're playing the Reds for the right to get to the World Series. It's a best-of-5 series, and it's game number 3. Routine ground ball looks like an easy play, and then all hell breaks loose. This is a game where the Mets were way out in front, 9-2. It's like the Reds need to regroup for a stay-alive game in Game 4. And yet, Pete Rose, who's 32 years old, and Pete Rose, who had some years earlier kind of altered the career of Ray Fosse, barreling into him in an exhibition game, an all-star game. This happens with Bob Murphy at the microphone.
Ground ball hit down to first base. Milner has it, throws to Buddy Harrelson, 1 to first, double play! And a fight breaks out. Pete Rose and Buddy Harrelson, both clubs spill out of the dugouts, and a wild fight is going on. Jerry Kuzman's in the middle of the fight. Everybody is out there. Buddy Harrelson and Pete Rose got into it. Rose apparently thought that Harrelson had done something in making the double play. Rose outweighs Harrelson about 35 pounds. And now Buzzy Capra is in a fight. Capra's in a fight. Out in center field, another fight breaks out.
1973. You know how many players were ejected from this game? 0. You know how many fines were doled out? 0. They got order restored, and the game continued. Rose asked after the game why he did what he did. He said, you know how many second basemen or shortstops I've knocked on their ass in my career? Bud Harrelson was just another one. Apparently, there was some trash talking that Rose was upset about, and he wanted to deliver against a man who was much smaller. And Bud Harrelson was a string beam, maybe played at 150 pounds. Rose was built like a linebacker, and he was going to let him have it. And apparently, this had gone back to an earlier game in the series where Cincinnati got shut out. And Harrelson said to reporters after the game that the Reds were swinging from their heels. So this gets back to Rose in the other clubhouse, and he calls him that little, a word I can't say, or that little, another word I can't say. And then Rose in the clubhouse is walking around saying, "You hitting off your heels?" saying to other teammates. And he says, Harrelson, the batting coach, says we're all batting off our heels. So he was upset about that and I guess wanted to deliver a message. Anyway, this is in Shea Stadium. Things get nuts. The game resumes. Rose goes out to left field, and the fans start pelting garbage on the field. And at one point, Rose nearly gets hit with a whiskey bottle coming out of the upper deck. And so Sparky Anderson comes out, and he's almost asking them to forfeit the game. He says, I'm taking my men out of here. Pete Rose has done too much for baseball to die in left field. They finally got Yogi Berra, the Mets manager, to go out to the outfield and bargain with the fans. They ultimately stopped throwing trash. New York won Game 3 without further incident, then won the pennant 2 days later, and it was in New York. And the fans, stormed the field and tore it up and things like that. But the Mets went on to the World Series that year, and they lost in 7 games to the Oakland A's. But that was history on this day in 1973 as Bud Harrelson and Pete Rose went at it. And now, sadly, both of them are gone, and so are the days of baseball when things were played out like that. Speaking of storming the field, this upset that Vanderbilt pulled off over Alabama over the weekend, they were fined, and I'm sure the school is going to be more than happy to pay this. But the fans, as you know, came out on the field. They took the goalposts and took the goalposts 2.5 miles away. I mean, those things are heavy, but they took it and threw it in the Columbia River. It's been since fished out. They're going to cut up the goalposts and sell it as memorabilia. The Nashville Fire Department had to take it out of the river, partly because it was a hazard. But the school, and this is, I guess, a new system that's set up either, I guess it's through the conference, it must be through the SEC. But as a first-time offender, the school was fined $100,000, which is no big deal. Arkansas, which pulled off an upset of number 4 Tennessee, they got hit harder because they've done this before. They had a field storm when they beat Alabama a couple of years ago, and so they won against or Arkansas beat Tennessee, and they were hit with a $250,000 fine. And if it happens again, they'll be hit at $500,000. I guess $500,000 is something to make you think twice about that. All right, Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.